I just got sick and tired of spending this money on fertilizer, planting into dry powder, and watching the soil blow away. We spent $0 making those switches. We spent zero and we were actually gaining probably tens of thousands of dollars. It's fun farming again.
Welcome to the 358th installment of Ear to the Ground, the Land Stewardship Project's podcast on family farming, regenerative agriculture, community food systems, and local democracy. I'm Brian DeVore, editor of the Land Stewardship Letter. Gauging the cost of doing business on a farm can take many forms. For example, buying a bunch of equipment to switch over to a no-till system or to seed cover crops can run up the tab pretty quickly. On the other hand, doing nothing can be pricey as well. Continuing to do things the same way can come with its own set of expenses, economically and environmentally, as well as from a quality of life perspective. But Meadowbrook Dairy in central Minnesota's Stearns County seems to have found a way to thread that balance sheet needle when it comes to making dramatic changes to the way it manages the soil. In 2016, the farm, after decades of conventional tillage, began using conservation tillage and cover crop mixes to reduce erosion and build organic matter. Over the years, the farm has also modified its manure handling practices to make better use of this byproduct as a source of fertility. The latest innovation the farm is experimenting with is adopting a composting system that can take their soil even further biologically. The operation consists of an 80-cow dairy and 300 beef steers, and also raises corn, soybeans, alfalfa, and small grains on 1,000 acres. Today, Meadowbrook is 100% no-till on its crop acres, which lie relatively flat, which consist of soils that are pretty sandy. Multi-species mixes of cover crops are a regular part of the rotation, and the operation is able to get manure applied across the fields at rates that are good agronomically and environmentally. When Alex Uterman and the rest of his family hosted a Practical Farmers of Iowa Field Day in August 2024, it was clear that these changes on Meadowbrook Farm were paying off in more ways than one. A slaking demonstration and some impromptu sampling showed that the sandy soil has good aggregate structure and is developing a rich, dark color, with lots of signs of activity on the part of earthworms and other beneficial critters. A cover crop planting demonstration showed that the soil was soaking up and retaining moisture well, at a time when precipitation frequency is a major guessing game. Alex Uterman is the fifth generation on this farm, which also consists of his wife, Chrissy, his brother Jake, and the brother's parents, John and Mary Lou. As he explained during the field day, this transition to regenerative practices has helped the farm dramatically reduce its reliance on chemical inputs, saving roughly $100 per acre in the cost of putting in a crop. The Uterman soil health journey has also paid off environmentally. Their farm is now enrolled in the Minnesota Agricultural Water Quality Certification Program, which is an official recognition that they're using conservation practices that protect lakes, rivers, streams, and groundwater. In addition, at the time this podcast was being recorded, Meadowbrook Dairy was a finalist for the 2024 Minnesota Leopold Conservation Award. Getting so many payoffs from building soil health doesn't come without some investments. But as Alex explained to me during an interview after the August field day, during the transition period that covered the years 2016 to 2021, the family's expenditures were decidedly not of a financial nature. In what Alex calls a low-input transition, rather than sinking big bucks into new equipment, for example, Meadowbrook Dairy invested more in taking a different approach to management and the way they viewed their soil. In a sense, knowledge was their biggest investment. And once this approach began to show signs of paying off, then the family put money into tools that would help continue their soil health journey. At that point, Alex explains, such purchases are no longer seen as a one-way expense. The expenditures graduated to the level of being long-term investments in fortifying a more resilient way of farming. Alex started our conversation by describing how the desire to save time and labor initially prompted this farm's different approach to profiting from the soil.
Well, just with running the dairy and the steers and just those 1,000 acres of row crops, it's a lot of irons in the fire at one time to get stuff done. I mean, you're milking cows from 5:30 in the morning and finishing up with chores hopefully by 8:30, 9 o'clock. Then we got to get all the field work done and get crops planted. And it kind of started with a labor issue. And there isn't one single thing that defined it. It just one thing started the snowball effect. But when people ask me why we changed, like I said, it's all the above. It's not just one thing. It's the labor issue, the timing, the money on the equipment, the return investment on fertilizer, the topsoil blowing away. We have no soil structure. Just backing up from like 2016, we went from full conventional prior to, as long as I can remember. Dad did it, Grandpa did it, great grandpa did it. I think I was the first generation that said there's got to be a better way. So what really struck my nerve was, like I said, in the springtime, like I said, just managing the dairy and the steers. We ran full tillage, so in the springtime, for example, we were disking chiseled ruts down from last fall, or we'd haul manure first and disc, and then we'd pick rocks, and then we'd come back and spread commercial fertilizer on those same acres to put some more nitrogen down, or on the bean acres we'd run P and K after we pick rocks, and we'd come back and field cultivate, and then we'd come back and plant and possibly roll. So we had, anytime in the springtime we were relying on hired labor that weren't full-time employees, so we're relying on people just showing up to help us, hopefully. And 2 4-wheel drives usually running in the spring, plus the planter was usually moving, and then we had to deal with morning chores and trying to get 2 or 3 guys picking rocks with 2 skid loaders and a tractor and a wagon. It just got to be so many tires moving in the spring. It's like there's gonna be a labor issue here sooner or later one day. It's like if we could reduce some of this stuff, that would help out tremendously. And then so that was kind of the start of it. And then the next thing was, I just got sick and tired of spending this money on fertilizer, planting into dry powder, and watching the soil blow away. And I wasn't having good success with that anymore. It just seemed like the weather was changing. We weren't getting the moisture like we were, and planting in the dry, fluffy soils seemed silly to me. Even when I was planting, tires on the tractor would sink down 5-6 inches, and then you'd be making ridges with the corn planter, and it's like, why am I even doing this? Because it's not a level seed bed, and it didn't seem right to me. So we kind of said, well, maybe we should just reduce our tillage on some acres and just work at one time instead of doing chisel, disc, and field cultivate. Let's just maybe don't do no fall tillage. Let's just hit in the spring one time and work our fertilizer and do our spring warm-up pass all in one pass. So from like 2016 to 2021, we had 5 years. We implemented no-till soybeans, and then we implemented a 1 spring light disc pass on our corn acres, where we had the ability to work in the fertilizer we were commercially buying or our manure. So we had 5 years of that, and that kind of got the jump start on our transition. When we made those initial 5 years of that transition, we spent $0. That's a key point that I want to stress here. Like, we had the same equipment, same tractors, same tillage stuff, same planter, same manure. It's just we managed our farm totally different without any investment, and we became just more profitable doing that way because we weren't running them 4-wheel drives in the fall no more, or in the spring hardly much, because we were just working up maybe a third to half of our acres to plant our corn, the other half went to beans or whatever, So we initially were saving money on fuel and filters and man hours and everything else that gets implied with owning tractors and equipment. And so that's kind of, I like to preach that the most. We don't have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to try something. We can just quit tilling the dirt and save money from the start. And then once we start doing that, we started seeing the soil health benefits with the darkening of the soils, and our worm count went up, and started seeing some aggregates, and the soil health was improving, but it wasn't at the rate I wanted to see it at. And so we knew this process worked. We just had to figure out a better way to kind of meet some more of our bigger goals we had in our back of our minds. So when we made the switch to no-till soybeans, like I'm a big believer. I like getting out of the tractor at least 2 or 3 times, check seed depth, to make sure the planter's working. So prior, when we were doing conventional, I still did that too. I never saw any. I always just thought soil was soil. Like, you grab it, it's just supposed to be this light, fluffy stuff, and it's just dirt. But then, like I said, I never found any worms when I was digging the soil, and I didn't know any better, but I didn't know what I was supposed to be looking for. And that's kind of what I stress at these field days too. Like we need to, train farmers' eyes. Like, we need to be looking at what's the color of our soil. So the first things I picked up on was our soils, like our sand soils, went from that light brown, beachy, sandy look. It's getting to be that, not like a maroonish brown color. It's not black, but it's not brownie. It's like an in-between color. So we're obviously getting more carbon stored in the soil, and we're starting to see a lot more earthworms probably within the first couple of years. We just saw that immediately. But now after I've kind of educated ourselves up in the last 2 or 3 years, I can understand what soil structure means and what it actually looks like. So to untrained eye, I thought, like I said, I thought soil was just to be this nice, fluffy, loose dirt when it's totally false. Correct soils is supposed to be a little firmer, have aggregates, they almost look like little dirt pebbles. And then you want to have, if you take a shovel spadeful, you want to tear it up, kind of have a good chunk on your soil, and you lift it up. On the soil, you should see a bunch of little holes, almost looks like a little cheese grater. Those would be your earthworm channels going in there. So that's the kind of stuff you can see in the soil. And then on top, you'd want to see, if you got really good soils, I've even seen myself too now, like you can almost put a pencil in some of these earthworm hole channels. And then they almost like little teepees where these worms will come up and they'll start pulling residue in and leaving their aggregate or the worm castings. Like I said, they just look little poo mountains kind of.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
I mean, those are your telltale signs that you're really improving your soil health structure and your soil functioning. But like I said, it takes a lot to train the eye to see that stuff. And then you kind of need a few years for some of this stuff to get into place. And we're getting our biology cooking again. We're having the worm activity. We're getting the biology back, and things are cycling. Getting the cover crops out there with the roots, and the glucose is getting pumped in the soil with photosynthesis. It's just, it takes time, and like I said, it takes a trained eye to start picking up on this stuff, because we were so used to just running conventional, we weren't really looking for that stuff.
So after that first 5 years of low input transition into soil health practices where you weren't investing any money per se, in making big investments in equipment, you kind of took the next step. You really thought this is the way to go, and we would kind of want to step up our game a little bit. So it sounds like you did some investments in equipment and some other systems there.
What we did was probably not the most traditional thing to do. Like I said, we had goals and visions for our farm. Especially me, I like dreaming big and shooting for the stars, I guess. So I just had an idea. I want to do no-till corn, and I knew from talking to everybody else, they said it was impossible, which nothing's impossible if you have the heart and desire to do it. So just spent countless hours researching and going to field days and Googling stuff and meeting people and networking with people and talking to our co-op. What's the issue going to be doing no-till corn? And they told me it's going to be too cold, not enough fertility, and the whole gamuts. And it's like I just took all that information and laid out the cons of why no-till won't work for corn. And then I found a solution to every single con that got addressed. So I knew if I could address all the cons that told no-till corn ain't gonna work, I know I won't fail then.
Yeah.
If the soil's too cold, well then everyone's soil's gonna be too cold. And then if we're not getting the right nutrients down, it's like, well then let's ban some nutrients. And if we're not getting proper seed depth, well then let's put the downforce on the corn planter. And then if there's too much residue, well then let's put the row cleaners on there. It's like there's a solution to every problem. You just have to figure out what the problem is first and then find a solution. You can't just run into this thing thinking it's going to work fine, because it takes time to do it. We did something very untraditional, probably the worst time farming, and my dad's been farming for his whole life too, and he's 60, and he said this is the worst time he's been through the 80s. I heard that was not fun, but he said this is probably worse than the 80s. The last 3 or 4 or 5 years ago, we went through a pretty downhill slump in farming, and that's the same time we made a significant investment in equipment on our farm. We pretty much flipped our business inside and out. We sold our 2 4-wheel drives, our chisel plow, field cultivator went down the road. We traded off 2 other front wheel assist tractors. We sold all our forage equipment, like our silage boxes and our pull type chopper. Baler wrapper went down the road, our hay binds are down the road. I just sold a lot of stuff that we weren't really using. We hired all our choppy now. In return, we bought some higher horsepower front wheel assist tractors, a new corn planter, the no-till, and a new no-till air drill to do cover crops and small grain. And we bought bigger vertical beater spreaders, and we bought our own liquid manure equipment. We kind of made the investment in our farm to look towards the future of how we're going to meet our regenerative goals. And we needed to have control in the way we handle our manure, because we had smaller box spreaders and we were keeping manure close to the farm just because it was not financially profitable to haul manure down the road with smaller equipment. And we were relying on a custom liquid applier to haul manure too. And the farther you go down the road, the more it costs, and it doesn't pencil out financially to haul manure 3, 4, 5 miles down the road custom wise. So we made the financial decision to buy manure equipment too. And then, like I said, we bought that new corn planter and the new air drill to fully adapt to 100% no-till on corn and soybeans and small grains and be able to do cover crops. The way we took the approach, we had, like I said, we had those 5 years of our low input trial error, which I don't regret doing. That was probably the best thing we did. And after we knew the system was going to work, we just had to figure out a way to get the proper equipment bought, and purchased, and cash flowed on our farm. So just started talking with Soil and Water and NRCS. This would be I believe our second or third time we're in CSP. That's the Conservation Stewardship Program. So we pretty much went down there. Well, this same year we got re-enrolled in CSP, and that's the same year we got water quality certified too. I wanted to be water quality certified in the worst way because I wanted that sign to prove to show our community, because we farm in Sartell. All our rented acres is pretty much residential, so I just wanted that proof that we're good farmers in the area and we're not the bad people that the media puts us to be. So in 2021, we become water quality certified with a new CSP contract renewed for 5 years, and we also got secured funding through 2 Ag BMP loans that we worked with at Soil and Water, or SWC for. One Ag BMP loan was for the planting equipment, the planter and the drill, and the other one was to purchase some manure equipment. All at 10 years at 3%. Payments were manageable with the CSP payment. So I kind of had all these things brewing up in the back, the scheme of things.
It was a big year.
Yeah. There's a lot of stuff to kind of get into place to kind of pull the trigger on going to Arnold's and buying all this equipment and at these other manure dealerships, but we needed to have the plan in place to offset that financial risk, that pull the plug on this stuff, to commit 100% to no-till. So that's kind of how we jumped into where we are right now, to be able to do 100% no-till with that equipment purchases. We bought the right equipment. We're in control of when we're in the field hauling our manure and putting it where it needs to get put, whether it's 3 miles away or whether it's 7 miles away. We're putting the manure where it needs to go at lower rates. Just to cover more acres as well. And we have the proper planter now and the proper drill to implement all the practice we're doing.
What I'm struck by is some of the things you talk about in your approach to this is you really took kind of a holistic approach, in that you weren't just looking at one practice, but kind of looking at the bigger picture of how you can build biology. And one really important element was, it sounds like you took a different approach to your manure. That maybe, I'm not saying you were treating it like a waste product. You were probably getting fertility out of it, but you kind of looked at it as, oh, is this a way that we can maybe replace a big part of our fertility program by looking at the biological activity that it can generate and kind of treating that manure a little differently?
The first step to come successful at this is we have to understand what all 5 soil health principles were. We have to minimize our soil disturbance. Are we doing reduced till, strip till, no-till, vertical tillage? Like maximizing our living roots. Are we planting a cover crop after our small grain harvest, or our silage and our soybeans? Maximize plants diversity. Let's get out of our corn soy rotation. Let's add a small grain or alfalfa or cover crops. Integrate livestock. That can go from anything. That's one that really gets picked on the most, is I can't get livestock on my soil. Well, we can add a cover crop, possibly, or we can get manure if we got a neighbor that has manure or poultry litter, or we can get into composting. I mean, there's lots of things that we can integrate livestock into, just in a different shape or form. It doesn't have to be a hoof on the ground, but ideally hoof on the ground is the best thing. But I don't have hoofs on the ground, but we're taking the approach of doing compost to get that one. And last one is maximize soil cover. So that could be your cover crops or last year's residue, manure, or compost, anything protecting that soil. And then my approach too is there's so much stuff that I'm trying to do, but I try to focus all of my energy, 100 some odd, maybe 120% of my energy on, try to pick one thing, maybe 2. That might be stretching it for me, but I just like picking 1 or 2 things and dedicating a lot of my time and energy and focusing on that, so I can pretty much hone in and specialize my time and talents and mastering that craft, whether it's doing no-till or cover crops or composting now. I don't like doing too many things at one time, because then I lose focus on the task I'm trying to eliminate, or the thing I'm trying to produce on that farm. If I want to maximize, how do I get to no-till work? Well, that's when I spent the whole winter researching and getting the planter built the way it was and stuff like that. So I try to focus on one thing to do a really good job at it, and I know I won't fail then, because if we take the time and dedication, it's going to work. So that's another thing I think is very positive to do. And back to the manure thing, yeah, I'm I'm sure we were abusing the system. I don't want to speak for everybody else, but I know we were trying to keep manure close to the farm just because of the financial cost of moving it. And I think once we made the conscious decision going from manure as being a waste and a byproduct of our cattle, and we started treating it as a commodity on our farm, it opened our eyes to the value of manure that we never even saw as a possibility, in my opinion. We went probably from hauling 10 to 15,000 gallons of liquid manure per acre on our corn acres we're going to plant corn to, and the bed pack, where it could be 20 ton or it could have been 50 ton. We had no idea because we didn't weigh nothing and kind of just hauled it. Looked good to me, and as long as it worked in the soil, just that's the way we were taught. And like I said, once we started treating it as a commodity, and then once you understand how the soil works and what the soil needs to grow a crop, and going off U of M fertilizer recommendations based off soil analysis, like I said, we were just working with soil and water on that part, and we took a whole different approach to how we manage our manure. And now, like I said, with the proper equipment, we're in control of when we haul and how we haul and where it goes. So we've lowered our rates tremendously, and we can calibrate our manure tanks to figure out how many gallons an acre we're starting out on. We don't have to haul X amount of loads to figure out, hey, we hauled 10 loads on this 10 acre field. Well, now we're at 7,300 gallons an acre on this manure when we should have been, oh crap, we should have been like 10 or 12 or whatever. You kind of just guess. And But now, like, we know what the formula is. There's a formula. You have to take your gallons per minute times 485 divided by your target rate times your width, and that gives you your ground speed you should be running. And then, like, for the solid manure too, like, we've never weighed a spreader in our life until a few years ago when we got started in this program. Like, so we know exactly how many tons we're hauling per acre. Or if you don't, like I said, if you want to calibrate your manure tank or your box spreader, it costs $0 to do, or hardly any. Because the manure, the liquid stuff, there's a formula. You don't have to own nothing. You just do some math. The solid manure, you might have to spend maybe $50 to buy a fish scale. Just a little hand fish scale. You can make a 1x1 square pad that I'd recommend maybe doing 2 or 3 of them, and you just put those out kind of in your field where you're going to haul manure on. Haul your manure like you normally would, and that manure would fall on top of that 1x1 square, and then you could weigh that. So that's going to weigh X amount of grams or pounds or whatever it is, and you take that times 43,560 because there's that many square feet in an acre, and that will give you your total pounds per acre you're applying that manure to. So then we can really dial in our bed pack and our liquid at the right rates we want, and we soil sample every fall. We're starting to do some Haney testing this spring on our corn acres to see if we can pull back our N rates and if there's any natural organic nitrogen available from manure or just in the soil that our current tests weren't picking up. Soil sample our manure every spring and fall as well to see where we're at, see if that changes, but it pretty much stays consistent. But I like knowing what we're hauling. It's just simple things like that really don't cost a whole lot of money to really improve your bottom end line. Like, I would never tell our co-op to go spread 500 pounds of urea on a cornfield just because I thought it needed it. Like, manure is money. It's a commodity. And if you utilize it the way it's supposed to be, it actually is a rather huge benefit. And because the more I know about the soil health and how the biology works, if we haul too much manure at one time, it actually is a detriment and it's harmful to our soils. And obviously, the more manure we haul, the more likely we are to be prone to leaching and runoff. So we try to keep our rates relatively low and cover over more acres, and we're kind of just trying to replace our P&K values as crop removals with our manure.
Do you have a rough idea of how much of your commercial fertilizer you've been able to replace, the percentage, by kind of focusing more on the manure?
I don't exactly have our percentages, but I can just tell you what we've done. Like in the past, we bought a lot of P&K and nitrogen just because we were keeping manure close to the farm, and our rented acres off the farm really relied heavily on commercial. But since we got our own manure equipment, we're hauling manure where it needs to go. We've eliminated all of our P&K commercial fertilizers dry on our corn and soy acres, and the only thing we really buy now is a liquid starter for our corn. It's a 624-6 with a pint of zinc, and I just added a pint of sugar in it this spring. But then for the beans, it's relying on any manure we hauled, or if the fertility's in the soil, we don't either haul no manure or no fertilizer. If the fertility's in the soil, we just plant beans right into that with no additional P&K. So yeah, the biggest thing, we eliminated all commercial P&K dry.
Yeah, so that must be a huge savings.
Well, it's tremendous. Doesn't matter if you farm 5 acres or 50,000 acres. If you can pull that out, if you're operating, that's a lot of dollars.
And you had a really interesting chart that you showed where you've kind of compared a difference that you've seen between the kind of what you call the conventional system and kind of the regenerative system that you're using now.
I just went off of kind of Iowa custom farm rates, and I put in what we were doing from, I just started at harvest. The combine was the same for both sides, and after combining, we'd maybe haul some manure, or we'd stock chops, and we'd chisel come spring. If we didn't haul manure in the fall, we'd haul it in the spring. Then we got to disc that in and shut the chisel ruts, or then we got to pick rocks. And then after we pick rocks, we spread some fertilizer, field cultivate that, then plant, and then possibly roll. And then that was our program. And I took all the dollar amounts and I just put kind of a custom rate. I didn't factor any, debt load or principal and interest payments on equipment, or I didn't factor any size operation. It just kind of, this is what, if you want to get this hired out, this is kind of what it would cost. And I think that came up to $332 an acre just on getting the tillage done and getting that seed in the ground. I didn't factor in like spraying or harvesting because I was just looking what does it cost me to do that tillage and get that seed in the ground growing. And then I went to our current system we're doing now, where say after harvest, I plant a cover crop in the spring. Either didn't get manure in the fall, we'll get manure in the spring, kind of same scenario. So we went from planting cover crop to manure and just to planting now. 3 steps instead of whatever the 8 or 10, whatever it was on the other side. But I think that one came to like $230 or so. Something. It was almost $100 difference, and that's including a cover crop at like $55 an acre in that equation.
You said you doing a 5-way mix of cover crops now, or what all are you doing?
Well, as for small grains, trying to shoot for like a 5 or 10 way mix, just to get that diversity out there. So we're gonna plant a bunch of legumes like peas, clover, some vetch. Really don't have the exact formula. I'm kind of just playing around with that idea right now. But after small grains, I would highly suggest getting that legume mix out there, that multi-species, because we have growing days yet to get that stuff growing for us and growing that nitrogen for next year's corn crop. That's the whole purpose of that cover crop, is to grow that nitrogen, and obviously all the other benefits from the soil health standpoint. But once silage comes off and soybeans come off, you're kind of limited to, let's just stick to the basics and do rye and oats, because we don't have a whole lot of growing days left, and let's get some out there to get some green, so the oats will come up real quick and get their benefits, and the rye will overwinter and come back next spring for us. And it's kind of the same thing after we get field corn off or high moisture. You're kind of almost just limited to rye, because oats ain't gonna really grow much in middle October, so we just stick to rye. Goal is to get in the ground and get it germinated, and it can just hang out all winter long, and time spring comes, it just takes off. Probably won't get a whole lot of growth in the fall, but it'll come back next spring.
So the last thing that we kind of looked at, and it sounds like it's the latest piece that you're trying to add to the soil health picture that you've got going here on the farm, is composting. You kind of just been experimenting with that a little bit, but it sounds like it's another way for you to really build that biology overall, and maybe also make use of homegrown ingredients a little bit, have a little bit more control over kind of what's going into your production system a little bit.
Well, I wouldn't say that's the last thing to our piece of the puzzle here, because there's other ideas I want to try, but like it's prior to, like, I like picking one thing and dedicating a lot of my time and energy to it. But the whole goal with the composting is, we're hauling manure 7 miles away. It's a long time. That's about an hour. It's a good hour per load. That's a lot of hours and fuel and tires on our tractors. But because if I can make compost, I can get half the tons in the same quality. So instead of hauling one load of just straight bed pack, we can get 2 loads crammed in one spreader after it's compost, and get the same value and have less hauling. The soil science behind it would be, if I get compost made, I'm going to create a highly fungal dominant compost, and I'm going to introduce that fungi out in the field. The field are bacteria dominant out in our row crop fields, just because we have no like wood source or carbon source typically like the woods and forests do. So we want to reintroduce that fungal activity back into our soil. So that's kind of the whole goal, I guess, behind making compost. We want to get fungal activity back on the, whether we're going to do a windrowing composting or a Johnson Sioux. Like, I don't really know. I'm playing around with the idea. I'm trying to figure out how the system works, how composting works, learn what all the different fungi and the bacteria and the protozoas and the good bugs versus the bad bugs, like the prey versus predator. Just working with NRCS, trying to figure out a game plan that's cost effective. This is my low input approach. We're not spending any money doing composting. Just been using the skid steer, turning piles. We didn't make the investment in a turner or any other fancy stuff you need, but I'm just really trying to learn the system behind making compost. Kind of like the same approach we took to adapting no-till and cover crops, with the intentions of taking this large scale, either windrowing with the compost turner or making a Johnson 2 and making extracts, and then possibly getting into seed treatments and running in furrow or foliar spraying it and all sorts of stuff.
This compost that we looked at now, you had gotten that started last October, and it's got like what, wood chips, bed pack, manure, or what all you got in that?
Oh yeah, I made 5 piles last year. I just started working with Julie from NRCS, and she has a microscope, and she's pretty knowledgeable about composting, so I'm not going to pretend I know what I'm talking about. So I try to surround myself with knowledgeable people that know what they're talking about and that want to help. So it's a huge help working with NRCS and Soil and Waters, because they give you the information and expertise that I necessarily don't have right now at the time, and they try to educate you, and they have the proper tools like the microscopes and know what they're looking at and stuff when we want to run some of this stuff composting. The biggest thing, she said, you can use anything you want for materials, but we have to make sure we have the correct carbon to nitrogen ratio. So we want to be in the 25 to 30 to 1 ratio, so we get the proper heating to get that compost broken down. And the biggest thing, we want to have a good high carbon source, and we want to have some wood chips in there. From what my research is, we can put corn stalks or rye straw, that they're very high in carbon, but the wood chips, there's something about the wood chips that bring that fungal activity alive in a compost pile. But they're a bear to compost, because they're like 600 to 1 for a seed N race. It's insane. Versus like corn stalks and rye are like 60 to 80 or whatever seed to 1. The wood chips are, I think, a necessary thing to have in that compost. But like I said, it just takes time to figure out the correct formula. But because I got 5 piles, the first one was just grass and leaves, and then maybe a little bit of, it was like probably 40% grass, 40% leaves, and then 10% some bed pack. That was one. And then the second one was, I forget the exact numbers, but it was like 60% grass and so many percent of leaves and so many percent of wood chips and some finished compost and some bed packed. Like, there's a whole formula. Then I kind of just said, if there's so many parts, I just picked, it's going to get 1 bucket of wood chips versus then like 10 buckets of grass. That's kind of how I made the formula. And my other pile, I kind of created my own creation, what I thought in my head that I would make a good compost. So I just kind of had fun with it. I just did my own ratios, but pretty much the same material, just different rates, just to see what would happen. And then I also had another pile of just pretty much straight wood chips. And I also added some cattle lot scraping, so like the loose manure that collect in the cattle yards, just to get that some more moisture in that pile and get some nitrogen to help break them wood chips down. And then I added a lot of water just to get them wood chips saturated. And then I also had, the last pile was just straight bed packed. But I found that one, the straight bed packed, I don't think is going to be a very feasible thing for us to do, because bed pack is like 15 or 20 to 1. It just it's too hot all the time, and you'd be constantly turning it. I don't think you'd ever not stop turning it, because it just gets so hot, and it'd get away on a guy. You'd almost have to add that with the higher carbon source, and I still think it would probably get away on a guy. But like I said, I'm still in the learning phases of composting, but trying to experiment and learn as much as I can right now before we make a bigger investment in a turner or stuff like that, or an extractor.
One thing that really struck me is because this is another very important element to making a farm quote unquote sustainable, is quality of life. And you were talking about how when you were in the midst of some of these pretty major changes financially in farming, things were not good. But ironically, or I guess fittingly, you actually felt like people, like your family was getting along better, and that things were actually going better on the farm in a way because of some of these changes you were making. I was really struck by that.
Like I said, I forget the times. Well, like I said, Dad been farming his whole life, and he's 60, and he went through the 80s, which were rough, and he told me, I forget what years it was, but it was 3 or 4 years ago, we had those like 3 or 4 stretches of farming. Everything just sucked. There's no other way to put it. I mean, crops were down, beef were down, everything was down in the crapper, and equipment was too expensive to buy, and it just, everything sucked about farming. And that's kind of the same time we made this decision, like, we have to do something different, because what we're doing is not working financially or on like a sustainable land approach. Like, we're depleting our soils, nothing's working on the ground no more, because we have zero soil health. So I mean, it just, running a business with family is great, but at the same time too, it's your family. You're gonna have disagreements, but we all got to sit down at the table at nighttime or get together for family functions. And once you mix money and business, sometimes money and family together, sometimes it's conflict of interest. One guy has this idea and the next one has the other idea, and there's no money to invest or play around with things, and it just becomes a conflict of interest sometimes. But things were very well. We're a happy family, but just tensions get a little high when there's bills to be paid and milk checks don't cover stuff like they used to, and beef don't, and crops don't grow like they should. But so once we made those 5 years of that reduced till, like, and the no-till soybeans, like, so we spent $0. I like what you said, the low input switch, or how would you?
Low input transition.
Yeah, I really like that. I was looking for a word that I'm going to steal that from you, but
That's fine.
But that's a really good way to look at it. Like I said, we spent $0 making those switches. We spent zero, and we were actually gaining probably tens of thousands of dollars, saving fuel, filters, parts, labor, the whole gamut. It went with it, and it's like it took the stress a little off of trying to, how the hell are we going to be farming next year if we can't meet ends meet, kind of, and it just gave us a reinsurance that it's going to be all right. And we were seeing the economic side first in our regen journey before we saw the actual soil benefits that we're seeing currently now. But like I said, once you see the economics, it's a lot easier to keep reinvesting in, like, say, equipment or different strategies like the composting or cover crops. Now, like, yeah, they're a new expense for our farm, but we can see the benefits they're creating. So it doesn't bother us no more to keep reinvesting into the soil health side of stuff, because we're going to get the economic return on it for sure. And like I said, we were just working like dogs, like every other farmer does. Like, we were running all that tillage equipment. We were working 9, 10, 11, midnight, 1 in the morning just because he had to. And like, we're picking rocks for a week and a half and just doing a lot of hard labor, unnecessary labor now, what we're doing now, but like, we're not doing that no more. Take care of our cattle. So we're no-till and cover crops. We're not out in the field as much as we used to, and you're at home every night for the most part, and we don't have to work till midnight every night just to get things done. We can quit at dark and be home and have supper with the family and enjoy life a little bit more, and we're not, fighting about how we're going to pay our bills and what expenses we're going to cut here to save $1, and every time you cut an expense, you lose something over here that helps you out too. So it's a never-ending battle, but I don't know, it just seems to work a lot better when we made the switch financially and as a family, because the pressure isn't there no more to, we got to get this many bushels per acre, or this much milk per cow, or get this rate of gain on our steers just to make ends meet. It's more kind of a relaxed approach. Actually enjoy farming again, I guess. It's a kind of better way to put it. It's fun farming again. It takes time. It could take 3 years or it could take 10 years to fix that soil. So if we jump into this thing, spending hundreds of thousands of dollars on planter technologies or updating this or getting guidance and all this other fancy stuff, I don't think we're going to see that economic return on that right away. So that's why we took that low input approach. Like, let's get kind of our soils started on the soil health journey before we make these huge investments on the planter and stuff like we did. So if we would have bought that planter and the drill right away, I think it would have been pretty tough making those payments because we wouldn't have that economic return on it, because our soil health was not there. Be willing to accept no-till corn and that water infiltration and the earthworm activity and the nutrient cycling. I don't think it would have been there. We're 8 years into this now, and we're nowhere near I want to be. And I think I hear a lot of people come and they say these are some of the best soils we've seen. Yeah, they are pretty nice, but they could be better. So I always had the mind approach, like, I can always be doing better. But when we bought that new corn planter and the drill, I thought I was done there, because I told myself when we had those 5 years from 2016 to 2021, I told myself, if I can figure out how to no-till corn, I'll be okay. I'll be done. I'll be happy. But once I figured that out, I was like, this ain't cutting the mustard no more, because we weren't seeing the soil structure that I wanted. But I told myself, right, I'll be happy once I can no-till corn. I'll be just fine. It'll be no more. But then it's like, no, there's more to this. So that's when we started, now we got to do cover crops. So that was the next thing. We invested a lot of time and energy in cover crops. And it's like, well, now I told myself, I'll be happy when I get that. Now we're going to be planting like 10-way legume mixes after small grains and looking to get into interseeding now, and or aerial droning and stuff like that. And now I'm making compost and going to be washing the compost, getting an extract, running that possibly through the corn planter, or seed treating, or spraying as a foliar spray or whatever, or just spreading bulk compost. Like, if you would have told me I'd be washing compost 10 years ago, I would say you're a lunatic. There's always more. Once you get bit by the soil bug, it don't stop. It's like this, like I said, it's a snowball down the mountain cliff. It just rolls out of control, and you kind of get addicted to it. And like I said, it made farming fun again.
For more on building soil health profitably, see the podcast page for Ear to the Ground episode 358 at landstewardshipproject.org. If you have comments or suggestions about this podcast, contact Brian DeVore at bdevore@landstewardshipproject.org, or you can call 612-816-9342. It helps us greatly if you can give Ear to the Ground a rating on whatever podcast platform you utilize. And word of mouth is the best way to spread the news about our podcast. If you like what you hear, tell at least one person about LSP's Ear to the Ground. Thanks to Laura Borgendale, Western Minnesota musician, for Ear to the Ground's theme music. And a special thank you to all of Land Stewardship Project's members who make initiatives such as this podcast possible. If you're not a member, visit landstewardshipproject.org to learn how you can support LSP. Thanks for listening.